is the typical profile. I love it. So that qualifies you for this. Basically, this is an exposure which we expect for you. Friends, without much ado, I'll hand over the mic to Nikhil. I mean, you are all Nitians and he's an Nitian. I don't require to introduce him much. Thank you very much. It's back to you.
Sure. Thank you, sir. So I think a lot of batches in Nitty know me. I've been on and off, been and thanks to sir, you know, he's been inviting me off and on, and I have been in touch with so many batches, and it feels good to always interact with a fresh batch of people.
So with this, let's begin the session on communication skills in the business environment.
You might be interested in what I used to do, possibly more. So I used to be a consultant. I worked with KPMG for more than a decade, just about 2 months short of 11 years. I worked for KPMG. What I used to do is, you know, all these client meetings, presentations, talking to clients, consulting them, doing projects across the globe, across the country, across the city. It was quite an interesting life. Of course I loved what I was doing all this while. A lot of my work involved the three very important tenets, essentially Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. A lot of my world used to revolve around these three. I still use PowerPoint significantly, maybe a little bit of Excel and Word, and I do get benefited because of the experience that I had in my KPMG days. But what I do now is something very different. But yeah, I mean, why is this background important is because this possibly qualifies me more than any other reason to take this session for you guys, you know, communication skills. And I'll come to that point just very quickly. So what do I do today? I think this is an important thing. So I'm a founder of this company called Darwin Travel Tech. We have our travel portal, which is called tripdarwin.com. We are trying to reimagine the way people book holidays. So until now, if you want to do a holiday, you have pretty much laid out options. You either go to a travel agent, that's one option. The second is you do everything on your own, on in your own in your at your own pace in a very complicated way. You know, you have to go to multiple websites and search and then get the best deals, book a hotel separately, book a flight separately, then you go and book some taxi services separately, you book some activities, excursions separately. So there's a lot of extra work required if you are planning a holiday, and that is something that we are solving. We are solving this problem, and we have created this portal so that people can at one place come and seamlessly create the entire holiday on their own, customize it the way they want, rather than be dependent on a third party like a travel agent or some call center executive. You know, and some of you may think, hey, Make My Trip already does that. Let me tell you, it does not. When you go to a Make My Trip and you try to book a holiday, the usual sequence is you will get a call back from a call center executive who will be doing all this groundwork in the background. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to digitize that whole thing. So that's what we are doing. It's still pretty much work in progress. Of course, a lot has been achieved. We've been at it for the last 4.5, 5 years. And that's what I do today. And as I said, some of my previous experience, of course, comes in handy, but there's been a lot of learning as well for me in the past 3, 4 years. But I understand. I mean, when it is nitty, I believe more of you will be excited to know about KPMG and stuff. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try my best to keep this session short and to finish maximum by maybe 3:15. I'll try to wrap up so that we have half an hour very clear to talk and to chat, and for me to answer your questions, or whatever questions may or may not be relevant to the subject that we are covering today. So, okay, this is just a simple, how it works slide of how our portal work. You typically go and you explore a particular destination. There's an explore destinations. Then you click on the build itinerary button on it. You come down, if you know the cities in this region, some of the cities will be automatically selected for you. If you don't know the cities, you can auto select them. From there, you go to something called build itinerary, and then you get a ready-made itinerary, which is fully customizable, bookable, real-time pricing, stuff like that. I don't want to spend too much time on this right now. I mean, but if any of you are curious, we'll be happy to take questions towards the end. Okay, so now this is the point, which I was making, that I'm possibly qualified because of my previous experience to tell you about communication skills, because in my work, in my role as a consultant, um, communication is 80% of consulting. 80% of it is about talking to people. 5% of it, very small bit of it, is about research. And 15% of it, of course, is relationships, building relationships, having those relationships. And uh, I think this is what my typical breakup was when I quit, because I was an associate director by that time. But as you go, I would say an initial step into a consulting career, when you become a consultant, when you get hired into a consulting firm, research will possibly be about 25 to 30% of your time, and that time will be get cut out of communication. But communication will and relationships will possibly be about just 5%. Um, um, uh, and therefore communication is still going to remain 80%, 80 or maybe 75% of it, because whatever time you need not spend on relationships in the initial days, you will spend on research. Having said that, research and all these things are important, and you are all learning all these things in at Nitty. But I cannot stress less that communication is everything, because if you don't communicate well, you can't build the relationship. If you don't communicate well, however good your research might be, it's not going to get, if it doesn't get communicated to your client, you are not going to be considered a very good consultant. So essentially, communication is mostly what a consultant does, rather than trying to uh, many people have this, especially in the industry, a lot of people have this, I would say, misconception that consultants know better than what they know. That's not usually the case. Consultants probably know less than what people in the industry know. People in the industry usually know much more than what a consultant knows. But at the same time, a consultant is very good at communicating, very good. Of course, consultants have some other skills as well. They can also extract information out of data. I think that's a very important skill. But all those skills aside, I think communication is the most important thing. And that is what and that is what makes consulting also exciting. I mean, also glamorous, because most of the consultants, you will find, they are very good at talking. They are very good at their interpersonal skills and stuff like that. So anyway, so what I'm going to talk about today, and honestly, I don't like this medium that we are using today, because there's no feedback coming to me. But keep the comments coming in, so that I can keep seeing what you guys have to say. So keep the comments on. I'm seeing some of the comments. We will definitely take some of them if there are questions and all that. Um, yeah, I see there is a question here, but we will take them up after the session, especially if it's not relevant. I'll take it after the session. So coming to the 3M's framework for effective business communication. Now, this is not mine. This is obviously an established framework. Communication, you can think of communication decomposed into three parts: the medium which is being used to communicate, the mindset part of communication. And the mindset part has two angles to it. One is your mindset, the other is the understanding and being very cognizant of the mindset of the person on the other side. And the third is, of course, the most important thing, the message. The message that you are trying to convey. And it's very important that whenever you communicate, and this could be as basic as you trying to make a sort of a pitch in your classroom, for doing something new, for organizing a party, or I don't know. I mean, I understand with COVID, you guys very few of you are in the campus, so I'm not too sure. whether you are organizing parties and all, but whatever it might be, right? Whenever you are communicating, it's very important to think of all three aspects, to pay attention to them, and then do the communication. So let's talk about the first one here, the medium. Okay, what the medium of communication. Um, Remember, whenever you're communicating, you will be communicating. Sometimes we are forced to use a medium. For example, right now I am being forced to use a medium of an online classroom session, but that's not always the case. In 90% of cases, you will always have the option. You could message someone on WhatsApp, or you could send them an email, or you could organize a phone call with them and talk to them on the phone, or you could record a video and send them a video. I know, sir made you do Visumes, so one of the ways of approaching a new employer is obviously to send a CV, a text-based CV, but then the other choice is to send a resume to them. So 90% of cases, I would say you may not have option to choose from any communication medium, but you would definitely have a choice from at least two. And it's important for you to think, is this the right medium to communicate this message? And again, some of this is basics, communication 101, but many times even seasoned communicators forget about this very basic thing. And I'll give you an example. You would have, I don't know how many of you have been following the whole space race that's going on amongst these billionaires, Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and everybody. Elon Musk is not in the race to go to space. But yeah, I mean, the other two. So Richard Branson was the first to go to space, and then followed by Jeff Bezos. So Jeff Bezos came back, and there was this small sort of after they came back from space, there was this TV video session that was going on with a presenter, and Jeff Bezos said, I am very thankful to all the people who buy things on Amazon, all my customers, all my employees, and all my shareholders of Amazon, because you guys paid for this. Now, while what he meant was very nice, he wanted to thank everyone, but he, the words didn't come out properly, because when he says you guys paid for this, everybody feels the pinch. Everybody says, hey, you two people went to space, um, and we paid for all this, and we didn't get to enjoy it. Now, that's an example of the right message in the wrong medium. The same message, exactly same thing, could have been said by him by doing a press release, which would have been detailed in text with a lot of context before and after. He could have said a lot more things, saying, I thank my shareholders because they allowed me to create this wealth, and this wealth has helped me to chase this dream of going into space, and it's going to also help mankind, and it's an achievement for mankind as a whole. He could have given a lot more background in a textual format before saying that you guys paid for this, and it would have appeared to be a much more grand message compared to what it came out as, because the medium that he was in, it was just a one-liner quip that he could give. So if it was a one-liner quip, this was possibly not the best thing to say in a one-liner quip. So that's very, very important. That's actually right message, wrong medium. It's an example of right message, wrong medium, and it might be happening to you many times. You might just say something in front of someone, and you may say, "Arey galat bol diya." I should not have said that. Sometimes, if you think deeply, you will realize that you didn't say something wrong. You just said it in the wrong medium. Maybe this was something that should have been said with more context over an email. The other thing is also, and I'll come to it when we are talking about the mindset part of it, is that medium also depends on who's the other person on the other side, and what medium do they prefer, and what impact will this medium have on them, right? So you are, if you whenever you guys get placed, and you are in your office, if you want to make a leave application, it's always better to make the leave application over email. It's not a great idea to send a WhatsApp message to your boss saying, can I take a holiday today? It's always better to send it over email with the right kind of a context. But You want to tell your boss that you will be late by 5 minutes for a meeting, and email is possibly the worst mediums to use for that, because you want him or her to read that particular message instantly. So there you have to use a WhatsApp message. And some of these things come very intuitively to us. We don't really need to think too much. Our minds are quite sharp and fast. But it's important for us to recognize that medium plays a very, very important role in communication. Choosing the right medium is the most important part of starting to think about how do you communicate. So some of the tips that you guys can use while choosing the right medium, have I considered the objective of this communication, the urgency of the communication, the importance of this communication, the confidentiality of this communication? All these aspects need to be thought about. What is my objective? What do I want to do? Do I want to just update them? Do I want them to take a decision based on this communication? Therefore, what kind of information will I provide to them? And therefore, is this medium appropriate to provide that kind of information? What is the urgency of this message? So as I said, if you're getting late, if you're running late for a meeting and you want to communicate to someone, it's very urgent, and there's no point sending out an email to everyone for this, right? Similarly, the importance of this message. What is the importance for you, importance in the minds of the person who's going to receive this message? Confidentiality of the message. How confidential is the message? So if it's too confidential, should it be sent over a text message or a WhatsApp, or should it be sent over a different channel that supports a better confidentiality parameters? So very, very important for us to think about. Then, is the message supposed to be put on record? Very, very important. There are certain messages that should be recorded. I'll give you a very important example for you guys in your career. Let's say you undergo an appraisal, and after the appraisal, you're not happy with the performance rating that has been given to you. You may think that this is a very soft issue and I should go and talk to my boss in person about it. And I will not say no to that. You should go and talk to your boss in person about it. But if you just go and talk to them in person and they give you some reasons, and then you come back saying, I'm not satisfied with the reasons, there is nothing else you can do after that. And because they have already given you the reason, they will not be obliged to take any actions. But if instead you went ahead and you first put your dissatisfaction with your rating on an email, which is a written form of communication. So you created a record that you are dissatisfied, and you may not have marked that email to anybody else. And then you ask them for a meeting. That can make a hell lot of a difference, because now they know that a record has been created that you are not happy. And if a record has now been created, now they are accountable to give you a satisfactory response, because you can escalate this to HR, for example, right? I mean, I'm giving you very practical examples of what can happen, when you get into it. So it's very important for you to think whether you want this thing to be recorded, or you don't want. This is not really something that needs to be recorded. You're going late for a meeting, you rather not get it recorded. You rather put it on a WhatsApp or an SMS, rather than on an email, because an email gets recorded. You don't want it to get recorded. So there's the other side of it. Then, does my receiver need to interact with me in person, or will technology suffice? This is especially important nowadays, because I mean, if it is an FYI that you are making to someone, you can just send them an email. So it doesn't take up their valuable time. Again, that's very, very important when you are interacting with clients, for example, in a consulting world, or with your superiors. Especially, as you approach closer to the middle management, to the C levels, it's very important to understand that their time is premium. And every time you insist on interacting with them in person, you are asking them for a premium. And just like you had this character Jarasangh in Mahabharata. He had 100 opportunities, uh, so 100 opportunities were given, and after 100, Krishna decided enough is enough. Now I'm going to cut off your head. Similarly, with important people, when it comes to asking for that premium, you have limited amount of opportunities. If every time, or if you exhaust those opportunities early on, you will stop getting those opportunities later. But if you are very conscious about taking that person's time, and if you try to communicate with them little by little without engaging, without consuming too much of their in-person time, and then ask them for a meeting only when it is necessary, you will get a much better response from such people. So very, very important, especially while interacting with the C level people. Does this person need to interact with me? And there may be the other side of it as well. As I said, if you think about that whole appraisal example I gave you, an email is necessary, but it is not sufficient. You will want to interact in person to resolve this matter. So you should insist on a personal interaction in that case. The next one, will the medium be sufficient and convenient for the information that I am providing and I am seeking? So I gave you the exact example, the example that I gave you of Jeff Bezos. I think somewhere at the back of his mind, he did not think about this aspect. The TV interview where he has to give a bite to the presenter is not a suitable medium. It is not going to be sufficient and convenient for this information, for his thanks to get conveyed. He could have stopped saying, I thank everybody who has made this possible. He could have stopped there. But okay, I mean, that is one way of doing it. But the other way could have been that he could have just given a quip saying it was wonderful to be in space. It was breathtaking experience, whatever. He could have said something completely different, right? And then he could have done his thanks in a press release, as I said. So very important for us to think about it. Can I be straightforward? Can I be purely factual? Or do I need to bring in my relationship here? Or do I need to bring in some sort of a story in here, right? Again, another very important aspect, because if you want to bring in your relationship, you need to think about the medium accordingly. An email is very impersonal. An IM message, a message sent on instant messenger, WhatsApp, is slightly more personal. A presentation, a video of yours is very, very personal. It has a very different impact. Um, an in-person meeting is even more personal. So to what extent do I want to leverage my relationship here? Okay. uh, that's very, very important. And which medium will ensure the maximum accuracy in comprehension and maximum retention of this message? Again, a very, very important aspect. What is it that will convey this message in the best way? What is the medium that will ensure that the person on the other side retains most of what I'm telling them? So, as I said, I sent you guys these a couple of slides before the class. One of the reasons is that some of the content that I'm going to talk through is meant to reinforce what I sent you guys. But what I sent you guys is the theory of it. And I would rather have you have those slides with you so that then if you wanted to go back and refer to them later, that would ensure better retention of the message. You can go and look up the 3 M's on the slide deck that I have sent you guys this morning. You may or may not, continue retaining whatever I'm telling you. You may not retain the examples that I'm giving you, which is fine, but you will at least have that slide to refer back to whenever you want to recall. And then two other points which are not necessarily related to the medium, but important to think. Have I chosen the right time to communicate? Have I chosen the right setup to communicate? I mean, again, a very important aspect. I except in rare circumstances, I do not send out instant messenger. We use Slack for our internal communications in my company, and I avoid sending Slack messages to my team after 9 p.m. in the night, unless it is urgent. And you may think, I mean, what's the point of having IM if you can't IM them after 9 p.m.? Like, it's not that they are not sitting in office, but I'm the boss. I am the boss. And if I send them a message after 9 p.m. in the night, and one is they are obliged to look at it because I'm the boss. Secondly, a message from the boss is considered urgent, and however great the boss may be, and I'm not saying I'm a great boss, but I'm saying however great the boss may be, but a message from the boss always increases your stress. So I don't want my team members to be stressed every night thinking about, hey, he sent this message. And even though my message might say you can take this up tomorrow morning, but that doesn't help. The message has already reached them. The stress levels have already gone up. I can't help them now. I mean, they're going to be thinking about it all night, and first thing they wake up in the morning, they're going to start doing that work. So if there is something like this, what I try to do is I I either put it on my to-do list to send them this message the next morning, and I would send that message as early as 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, or I would type it out on an email, and I will schedule that email to go out of my mailbox in the morning 7 a.m. So even if I am writing that email at night, I don't want them to see that email at night, because the intention of these messages is that this is what you guys have to do tomorrow. Please take care of this tomorrow or this week or whatever. It's anyways not meant to be communicated urgently. And nowadays email communication tools are wonderful. I mean, when I started working, we couldn't do some of these things. Now it's so easy to schedule a message. It's so easy to schedule some of the other things. So it's important, it's important therefore for us to think about the right time to communicate. I gave you my perspective as a boss, but there'll be many more things that you could think of as somebody who's going to be joining at the lower rung of the organization, as to about the right time to communicate something, right? And have I chosen the right setup? That applies. I mean, I'll tell you this. Out of the 11 years of my career in KPMG, of course, I've had 11 annual appraisals and 11 half yearly appraisals. Hello? I could hear something. I don't know whether am I audible, guys? Can somebody just say whether I'm audible or not? Okay, great. Okay, fine. So
You are audible, Nikhil.
yeah. So I've had 11 appraisals and 11 half yearly appraisals, total 22 meetings, and I would say I was fortunate that I always had the same boss throughout my career who did my appraisal, and um, and we always, for every appraisal meeting, used to meet in a cafe coffee day, and that for me initially was a little inconvenient, because an appraisal is something that's something very formal. You are being judged, and you want feedback, and you want to make sure that all goes well. So initially it was little not so comforting. Of course, I mean, after the first 2-3 years you become friends, right? I mean, I am like now best friends with my boss now. I mean, but uh, but later I realized that it was really very good, because you need to understand that the appraisal is actually a high stress conversation. The fact that you are meeting in a low stress environment, which is like an external place, not the office, actually makes your communication much more effective, because you're in a low stress environment having a high stress conversation. Your overall stress levels are down. When your stress levels come down, you are much more open and you can communicate much more freely. On the other hand, if you were sitting with your boss in their cabin, and as most corporate offices today are, it would be a glass cabin with all your colleagues looking at you from outside. Imagine the level of stress that it could take you to. So it's better to be in an and that's the other part. We mostly used to meet in different cafe coffee days. We never met at the same cafe coffee day always. So it was always a slightly anonymized sort of an environment, and therefore the stress was much lower. So again, I'm just giving you one example, but there are many such things that you need to think about, that is this the right setup to communicate and stuff. So with that, let's move to the second aspect, which is, I would say, most important aspect of communication that you guys need to think about, which is the mindset part. And you can see the GIF here, that's playing here. Those of you who are fans, this is from the Matrix. Essentially, mindset is about two things: your own mindset, but most importantly, and that's what this GIF is trying to convey, you need to get inside the head of the person with whom you are communicating. It's very, very important to go inside their head. You need to become those people. You need to empathize with them to understand their mindset, and then the communication starts. That's where the magic of communication happens. You need to know how the other person will perceive your communication. What are they hearing? What is what will they read in your email? Which are the parts that they will stress? And what is it that you want them to notice? That's very, very important. That's what mindset is all about. So that this is there's a lot of theory around this, and again, I've sent this to you guys. Uh, this is of course a broad generalization, and so there are different kinds of people, and there are these four profiles, communication styles that have been created by some researchers. There's a regulator, there's a visionary, there is analyst, there's a facilitator. Everybody has a dominant style, and I can also tell you another thing. These One is nobody is of one style alone. That's point number one. So don't think that you are either a regulator or a visionary, or I am either a regulator or a visionary or an analyst or a facilitator. No. Number one, we are all a mix of these, but obviously there'll be a dominant style. That's point number one. There'll be a dominant style, but the others will also be present. Second, your styles will change based on the role that you are playing at that moment. It will change based on your age. It will change based on your position. It will change based on what you are doing and what have you been nominated for. And um, I don't know how many of you have studied. There is a very nice story by Munshi Premchand in the CBSE syllabus. It is called Panch Parmeshwar, and I'll try to summarize the story. So the story goes like this: there are two friends, in the village. There is a dispute of one of the friends with somebody else in the village, and the dispute goes to the panchayat. The other friend is nominated as the sarpanch, which is to decide on that case. And this first friend, the friend who's the sarpanch, he ends up giving a decision against his own very close friend, and that is where their friendship sort of breaks off. And then a couple of years pass by, and then the exact reverse happens. The friend who was the sarpanch is now involved in another case, another dispute with somebody else in the village. And this friend, who has by now has become like an enemy, is now made the sarpanch, and he's made the sarpanch by one of the parties, by the other party, because they think that he will extract revenge. But when he becomes the sarpanch, he realizes that when you become the sarpanch, you take on the role of being the judge. When you are a judge, when power comes to you, when you are the judge, you cannot allow your personal prejudices to come and decide the future of the case. The person who's right is right, the person who's wrong is wrong. And uh, at the end of the story, the other friend, who's now the sarpanch, he gives a verdict in favor of his friend because his friend was right. And that's how their friendship gets mended. And he realizes that this is not about you versus me. This is all about playing the role that you have been given. And that's very, very important. That happens to all of us. This is a very human story. It happens to all of us, that all of us change our styles based on our own what we are doing at that point of time. So right now I'm currently teaching you, right? I'm teaching you something. So I possibly am going to play the role of a visionary and a facilitator combined. And Professor Prasad, he's currently the regulator because his job is to regulate. He's not teaching you right now. But the moment he starts teaching you, he will shift from the regulator mode to a visionary facilitator mode. So that's going to be the difference. The other important part of growing or changing between these things is for you yourself. When you start in your careers, it's most likely that you will exhibit the bottom two more frequently than the top two, because your role will be, you are just beginning in your careers. Your most of the jobs that will be given to you, most of the tasks given to you will be of the analyst kind or the facilitator kind, right? So you will, and you have less experience at that time when you just starting your careers. So therefore you will gravitate towards being an analyst or a facilitator. As you start growing in your career, as you start gaining more experience, as you get more promotions in your job, you will move towards becoming a regulator and a visionary. And you could be both, you could be one of the two. Now, what is important here is to understand what are these four roles. So as you move towards the top, you talk more, you tell more. As you move towards the bottom, you ask more. On the other side, the left side, which is the regulator and the analyst, they express less, they consume more. The visionary and the facilitators, they express more, they consume less. So now what you need to think about is, when you have these four layers thinking about, you need to think about two things. What is your dominant communication style? You all will have a dominant communication style. Whenever you communicate, if you are someone who tries to tell the world, hey, here is the view from one person, here is a view from another person, here is what the third person says, and therefore this is what it should be done, you are more of the facilitator sort. But if you are someone who's talking a lot more about not what people say, but about, here is fact one, here is fact two, here is fact three, here is fact four, and therefore this is the correct fact, you are more of the analyst sort. On the other side, and I'm going to talk about the other side here, because most cases when you are communicating to somebody senior, you're communicating to a regulator or a visionary. If you are someone who wants to know a lot of information and wants to take a decision very quickly, you are a regulator sort of a person. But if you're a visionary, you would seek lot more information, lot more data, and you would possibly not decide yourself. You would ask the other person, what should I do? What do you want me to do? And then that visionary will still take a decision on their own, but they will talk, they will listen a lot more from people. I'll give you some two examples from public life. Narendra Modi is a very clear regulator. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was his predecessor in the same political regime, was a visionary type. And if you can contrast these two personalities, you will very clearly see regulator versus visionary. Um, if you come to the bottom side of it, again, I'll take political names so that some of you can make that. Um, uh, 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 you have Arun Jaitley, who was more of a facilitator sort. Why? Because his typical job used to be to take everyone together and to get things done. One of the reasons why India could pass the GST bill was because of the facilitator prowess that Arun Jaitley had. On the other hand, you would have people who are very technically astute people like maybe Piyush Goyal, for example, or even Nirmala Sitharaman, who will be of the analyst type more than the facilitator type. They take a lot of data, they look at a lot of facts, and then they take decisions. They speak less, they express less, but they consume a lot more information. So that's possibly one very important thing. What you need to understand is what is your dominant style, and you need to keep that style in check, because what will happen is you will always tend to go towards the style which you yourself are, but you have to always think the other way around. You have to start thinking, what is the personality style of the person with whom I'm communicating, and then make sure that you don't conflict. So I'll give you very clear reasons when there can be a conflict. There'll be a conflict if an analyst is talking to a visionary and if a facilitator is talking to a regulator. These are the two places where there will be conflicts. There will be very little conflict when an analyst is talking to a regulator or a facilitator is talking to the visionary. So cross connections will always be conflicting. Straight connections will be less conflicting in the vertical order. On the horizontal order, there will always be conflicts. So a visionary and a regulator will always conflict because they have very different styles. An analyst and a facilitator will also conflict because they have two very different styles. So it's very important to understand. So therefore, let us say, for example, I am the visionary type, right? But I am going and talking to a regulator. Unless I consciously make an attempt to subdue my visionary style and to talk to the regulator knowing that this person is a regulator, I will fail. So it's very, very important for you to think about it this way. You need to recognize what is your dominant style. Then you need to recognize what is the dominant side of the person on the other side. And based on that, you need to be able to make your communication work. Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this slide. We've already spoken about it. But you guys can go through it. I believe I've sent this to you guys over on the WhatsApp group video, and then we can discuss this. So yeah.
You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to practice your powers of deductive reasoning. Or would that be inductive reasoning? Deductive, inductive. What's the difference? Deductive reasoning starts out with a hypothesis and examines the possibilities to reach a specific logical conclusion. For example, spiders have 8 legs. A black widow is a spider. Therefore, a black widow has 8 legs. Think of it as a mathematical equation. A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. For deductive reasoning to work, the hypothesis must be correct. It's assumed that the premises, spiders have 8 legs and a black widow is a spider, are true. So the conclusion is logical and true, because in deductive reasoning, if something's true of a group of things in general, it's also true for all members of that group. However, even if the generalization is not true, it's possible to come to a conclusion that sounds logical, but may also be incorrect. If I say all spiders eat fish, a black widow is a spider, therefore black widows eat fish. It's valid logically, but it's untrue, because the original statement is false. Inductive reasoning, on the other hand, makes broad generalizations from specific observations. There's data, then conclusions are drawn from the data. Here's how it works. A coin that I pulled from this bag is a penny. A second coin is a penny. A third coin is also a penny. Therefore, all the coins in the bag are pennies. But inductive reasoning allows for a conclusion to be false even if the premises are true. For example, cobras are venomous. Cobras are snakes. Therefore, all snakes are venomous. Inductive reasoning may not always produce a true conclusion, but scientists can use it to produce hypotheses to investigate. And they use deductive reasoning to apply the hypotheses to answer specific questions about science. Deductive and inductive reasoning. But wait, what about abductive reasoning? This is a type of scientific reasoning that is neither inductive nor deductive. It usually starts with an incomplete set of observations and goes from there to the likeliest possible explanation. And it's used for making and testing a hypothesis with whatever information is available. For example, you walk into your room and find papers all over the floor. The window's open. You conclude that the wind blew the papers around because it's the most likely scenario. Of course, it's possible that your roommate snuck in and tossed the papers around, but the window theory is the more feasible conclusion. Deductive and inductive and abductive reasoning.
So I know the reason why I showed you that video is while inductive, deductive, it's an important thing, and we'll possibly use it a little more in the next session when I possibly explain you guys about making presentations and stuff, and it's going to be very useful there. But it's an important part of communication because you need to understand that inductive reasoning works much more effectively when we are communicating something than deductive. Deductive can work. Deductive can work when you are writing a research paper, for example. Abductive can work for Sherlock Holmes, for example, right? It can work for Sherlock Holmes or Dr. Strange and all these things. But when you are doing regular business communications, inductive reasoning is something that will work 99% of the times because of multiple reasons. Number one, in most business communications, I can assure you, people will always be challenged for time. They don't have so much time to go the deductive way, which is to go through all the different conclusions that there are and then conclude on that. So they want to hear quick things fast, that's one reason. Second reason is, and as you guys, if I'm sure you guys watch TED videos, if you don't, please do watch TED videos. you will see that typically in many cases, the TED video typically starts with the speaker talking about one big thing in the very beginning, and then talks through the entire thing to support the one belief that they started with. So, the reason for that is that in today's age of social media, um, what happens is that your attention span is limited, and therefore you typically need a big bang, some sort of a very major thing to register in your mind for you to take notice of what is being said. And that's why TED videos start like that. They start with some sort of a startling statement, some big bang exclamation mark statement, right? So that's the style that works because of the limited attention span that we are living in today. So, and that's why inductive reasoning works, because when you are using inductive reasoning, one of the facts in the whole chain of inductive reasoning will be something that's very, very startling, a big bang. So you will start with a big bang, then you will possibly go about list about reasons for, why this is true and what is happening and all those things. Then you will add a few more smaller facts to reinforce the same belief. Okay. And then you would come to a conclusion. So and as you will realize when we talk about making documents and presentations in the next session, you guys will know that that also works very well. It translates very well into documents, presentations, videos, speeches, and stuff like that. So practice inductive reasoning as much as you can, and we are going to get more closer to this point in the next session. Yeah. So the last point now, we discussed medium, we discussed about the mindset part. So these two things are very important. Now we come to the actual message. What is the message that we are going to talk about? How do you structure the message? Again, we are going to talk more about the messaging part in the next class. Today is more of a teaser for that. But then any message, whether it's an email, whether it's a WhatsApp message, whether it's a document that you're trying to create, whether it's a presentation you are making, whether it's a speech that you are making, whether it's a video you are making, or it could be a meme that is being communicated. Again, very important. Think about the reason of your communication. Why is it that you're making this communication? What do you want to achieve? Make sure you get the elements right. What is the structure of this message? What is the language of this message? What should the language be looking like? Should it be very formal? Should it be informal? Should it be somewhere in between? Should it have lingo? Should it have abbreviations? Does it need context? All those things. Completeness. We are going to cover a lot more about completeness in the next class. There's something called NISI that I love, that I learned from one of my bosses, which I'm going to tell you about. Clarity of the message. The message should be clear to the person who's going to consume it. And consistency, making sure that you do not conflict what you're saying in the message. Okay. What are the outcomes of a message? What is the desired outcome of the message? Are you expecting a decision from the other person, or is it just an FYI? Do you want them to start thinking about something? Do you want them to influence? Do you want them to conclude on something and not tell you about it? Do you want them to conclude on something and then give you a decision? What are the agreed points of view that you want to drive, and what are the next steps you expect after this communication to happen? Do you not expect anything? Do you expect something? If that is something, what do you expect? Your communication depends a lot on these aspects. So yeah, so I'm going to focus on today's session, and this is the last technical slide that we are going to cover today. I'm only going to talk about emails, because that's what that will give you an overall sense, and you can extend the email thing. Email sits somewhere in between a document, presentation, report, and IM or a WhatsApp message or a text message and stuff like that. So it's right in the middle, so you can possibly extrapolate it on both sides. And remember, I am giving you a set of rules, but these rules have been extracted from the theory that I just talked about all this while. Make sure you personalize your emails. Make sure that you think about the other person on the other side. And I can tell you to the extent that things can be thought about in personalization. For example, whenever I am interacting with an American, even in business communications, I do a hi XYZ. But when I'm interacting with an Indian, I typically say, dear so and so. If I'm interacting with somebody who's government or quasi-government, I start with dear sir oblique madam. So that's, the difference between, and if I'm interacting with someone who's younger to me, I will change that hi to a hello. So, these are all very subtle things that you need to think about, that what will your
Wow.
address be? How does a
Yeah.
hi and a hello and a dear make a difference? Then make sure.
It's-
Yeah. So you want to say
Nikhil,
something? Yeah.
yeah. Just ask them which point they would like to ask you to explain more.
That's a good idea, rather
Just
than
see
me
for
covering
it.
everything. Yes.
Let us
So
wait
yeah,
for their response.
sure.
You put up a proposal or request for them. That's better. You ask them. You just put up again, Nikhil.
Okay. Use of CC and BCC. That's something that came up. That's the first point. So one is, as far as possible, avoid the
You
BCC
just
altogether.
wait for what points they will ask you.
No, no. So they've already
Just
started
wait
putting in
for more
points.
points like that.
Okay.
That's good. I think you get this. I don't get it. I think. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
then okay, go
I'm
ahead.
getting the points. Yeah, yeah. So use of CC and BCC. So one thing is, to the extent possible, avoid doing BCCs at all. Don't do BCCs. Usually, it's a good idea that whenever you send an email, CC whoever you want the sender, the receiver to know has been made aware of. They will be put in CC. If you want to send somebody a BCC, you should forward them the email separately. That's usually the good practice. But then there will be scenarios where you will want to do BCC. For example, you are sending a general update to a lot of people, and these people in between themselves don't know each other, and you don't want them to know each other. So you would do a BCC. So it could be, I'll give you an example. I get an email from an acquaintance of mine about how they spent the last year, and this person has this habit. They spent their last year's thing to everybody in their circle. So I may or may not know everybody whom they are sending this mail to. I may know some of them. Some of them may be my cousins. Some of them may be maybe my friends. Some of them may be so he will have a mix of people who are his cousins, friends, relatives, ex-colleagues, and all that. So BCC will be the best utilized in such scenarios. But in most other cases, so if let me put it this way: if you are in doubt, do not do BCC, forward the mail separately. If you are not in doubt, then you are pretty sure you're using BCC properly. How to express our tone in the email? I think this goes a lot into using the right kind of words, using language that is very respectful. So as I said, so whenever, let us say you are going to write to an income tax official, and you're going to contest what they have said. They have raised a notice on you, and you are going to say, no, I do not agree with you. It is very easy to write this in a very offensive language, but you can also write it in a very nice language. You can start with respected sir. I would like to bring to your kind attention, blah, blah, blah. I humbly request you to do so and so. So some of the words that you sprinkle inside can make an otherwise harsh message, which is actually a dispute, tone it down and make it more bearable for the person on the other side. Similarly, let us say again, I'll go back to that example. I think it's my favorite example, that you got a bad appraisal and you wanted to contest that. You could start with saying, while I agree with point A, B, C, but point B is what I do not agree with. So by saying that I agree with point A, B, C, you are sort of giving that person enough due credit for having judged you correctly on A, B, C. So rather than only disputing the point D, you have given them some credit, and therefore you have given them more respect. If you do not mention ABC and you directly say, I do not agree with point D, most likely scenario is the person on the other side will become very defensive, saying, no, no, this is all correct. But if you tell them that I agree with point ABC, you've already acknowledged that they were right 99% of the times, or at least 75% of the times, and 25% of the times they were wrong. So now they cannot simply become defensive and say, no, no, you are wrong, I am right. So rather than making it "you are wrong, I am right" kind of a message, you have to make it saying "you are right" so many times, but here is what I disagree with. Those are the ways in which you can change the tone of your email. Some other very important things, of course, I think most of you are digital natives, you would know, but make sure you use caps properly. Do not use caps when you don't want to, when you should not be using. And again, use of punctuation marks. Again, I think you guys are good at it, but one thing that I would caution all of you is instant messaging, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and business communication are two different things. So make sure that you are not carrying the habits of informal chat communication to your business communication. Business communication has to become as formal as possible, and the best way to learn business communication is to go through existing documentation that's available, right? You can read reports, you can read emails that people have sent to each other, and there is a lot of content available out there on the internet. I don't see any other questions. Anything else anybody has? Any other points you want me to cover? Okay, let me then move on to the last point, which is in-person interaction guide. So most of the times, and a lot of times, communication will happen when you are sitting across the table with someone, and you are maybe with your friends in the mess, or you are in the classroom with your teacher, or you are in the office with your colleagues. You would have an in-person communication. Again, this is not, I'm not talking about informal discussions that happen. I'm talking about formal discussions that happen where you want to communicate a point of view, you want to hear something back from them, you want a decision from the other person. What should your typical style be, right? So 3-step guide: listen, check understanding, make procedural suggestions. But before that, you typically open. So if you are the person who's supposed to be doing the opening, you open the discussion with a brief summary of what is it that we want to talk about, what is it that you want to discuss with them. Then clarify. So expand the whole thing, provide your point of view in terms of what is it that your point of view is, what is it that you want to communicate, what do you want to do. Then develop your argument further. That is the next thing. So to develop your argument, again, a lot of this will become clearer next class when we discuss the details about the structuring. But develop your argument means, once you have told them what you want, give them some supporting facts of why do you want this, why is it that you are stating this position. And then after that, in between, make sure that then you give them space, listen to them, listen to what they are saying, check the understanding of what you have said, told them, had they really understood that. So ask them, is this clear? And again, it depends. If you're talking to a superior, you may not use the same thing. You may not say, is this clear? You may use a different term like, do you want me to explain this again, right? That could be a way of talking to a superior compared to somebody who's junior to you. And then make procedural suggestions on what changes you want to, what actions you want, or what changes you want them to do. And finally, come to an agreement. Once you have arrived at an agreement, again, you can close the whole discussion, and you can move on. But before you close, the closing also has to go through a summary. You should again go back and repeat, this is what we discussed, this is what we have understood, this is the summary of what I'm going to do next, this is the action that I'm going to take. So this is the in-person interaction guide. With that, I close for the day today. I think I overshot by about 15 minutes, but yeah, this is what I'm going to cover in the next session. We are going to do communication about presentations, documents, about speeches, and I'm going to cover the subject of personal branding also. A sneak preview of what we are going to do. This is the agenda that I'm going to cover in the next session in a week from now. And yeah, I think from there I move on to a Q&A. The floor is now open. You guys can put out any questions you have. They may or may not be relevant to the subject. I am open to any other questions you guys might have. Let's take those questions and let's spend the next 15 minutes talking to each other. So let me start by answering the one around tourism, because it was asked earlier also. So yeah, I think you're right. Tourism is worst hit during the pandemic. We got impacted ourselves. Our revenues dried up. Um, uh, what did we do in the interim? So we did a lot of things in the interim. One is that when we started out in 2016, we were focused on becoming a SaaS product for travel agents. and we were on our way to doing that when we started out. But the pandemic hit, and it has done two things for us. Number one, it gave us some breathing space from whatever. So we were mostly catering to the market. So from catering to the market, it gave us the opportunity to think back and go back to the drawing slate. And incidentally, we had already started thinking from the blank slate, and we already had a version of our website in the making. So our website earlier used to be called bookmytraveler.com, and it was exclusively meant for travel agents. But then we used the pandemic time to re-engineer and rebuild our platform as a more B2C facing platform. And we use that time to do software development. We use that time to do things that we couldn't have otherwise done, and we used it to also do a pivot. So we are currently executing our pivot, which is we are trying to work, obviously there is no business with the travel agents right now, so we are trying to work more with other kind of companies, and we are also looking to see how we can pivot towards the B2C world. And yeah, I think that's what has been going. We've sort of used whatever reserves we had, and hopefully in the next couple of months, we are just wary of the third wave coming in. But if the third wave doesn't come in, you will possibly hear more about us from different channels, banks and some other partners whom we have sort of worked with. You will hear more about us from them. So yeah, I think that's about the tourism. If there are, so feel free to post any follow-up questions as well. I mean, no need to restrict to only the first question. Okay, I think
Can you
yeah,
can you read questions?
sure. So one of the questions that is of extreme interest to me is, can a fresher be a consultant? I was a fresher when I was at NITI, and I became a consultant. So I would suggest you go to my blog. It's nikhilkulkarni.in, and search for posts which are in 2004 and maybe 2005, when I actually became a consultant, and you will be able to read thoughts of the 23, 24-year-old Nikhil Kulkarni. So rather than the 40-year-old Nikhil Kulkarni telling you whether a fresher can be a consultant, I think it's better if you hear it from somebody who was of your age at that time, as to how he became a consultant, and what helped and what did not help. So therefore, I'm not going to talk about the story. The answer is, can a fresher be a consultant? Yes, definitely freshers can be a consultants. In fact, I believe freshers have an advantage that they come with a fresh mindset. Whereas people with work experience, they have some baggage which they have to carry. And sometimes it becomes difficult for people with work experience to get placed in companies that are outside the comfort zone of what they have already been doing. So it's sometimes, many of you must have joined MBA after work experience mainly because you wanted to change what we're doing to something else. But that is easier said than done. So the advantage that freshers have is that you don't have any baggage, and I think there is nothing better than that. And I don't think there's a concern about how to become a consultant. But if you want a specific answer, go to my blog, read about it, and I have also answered a few questions on Quora around same or similar questions. So I don't want to waste more time on that. So go. There is enough material from me available to read about it. There is a fear in the mind sometimes when sending a written mail to a manager or a top leader that he might be offended. So we refrain from mailing them. How do we deal with this fear? You deal with this fear by being respectful. I would say never be afraid. And this was one important lesson that I have learned in my life much earlier on, that being afraid. So I'll tell you, this is an incident that happened in my engineering college. What happened is, and I'm sure you are all engineers, you must have been through that time. This was we were I think in final year, and we did a mass bunking. So we bunked one of our classes. And what happened is, there were two. There was one class in the morning, and there was another class right at 4 o'clock, and there was nothing during the day. And then there was another class, and that's it. So we bunked the 4 o'clock class. Now it so happened that the 4 o'clock class was supposed to be taken by the head of our department, and we came to know about this change of guard. That the head of the department was going to take that class. just in the nick of time. So we all came to know of it, and then we all rushed back saying, "Oh, he's going to take the class, so we have to get back. We can't bunk that class." So we came back, but obviously all of us got late, and we reached the campus around 4:15. And that's when we know that he's already visited the class. He saw nobody was there in the class, and he's gone back to his to his cabin. And obviously everybody was afraid, nobody wanted to do anything, and already, and we know that we are in trouble. So what do you do, right? So we didn't know what to do. We were all gathered, and then at that point of time, I don't know why and how, and maybe something to do with the fact that I was the best student in his subject. He used to teach us microprocessors, so I was very good at microprocessors as a subject. So I volunteered saying, okay, I will go and talk to him. So obviously I was also shit scared, and I went to his cabin, and I first apologized to him, obviously very respectfully, and said that we are all very sorry. We did not intend to bunk your class. We didn't know you were going to take that class. And he obviously, as any teacher would say, his response was that, why would you want to bunk somebody else's class? That's also not acceptable. So then I told him in absolute truthfulness, I told him that the reason why this happened is because there was one class in the morning, and the only other classroom session that was there was at 4 o'clock. The whole day was free. So a lot of us, were tempted to just leave the campus and go out. And he was very positive. He said, "Oh, if that is the problem, you guys should have told me earlier." And he took the initiative, and he changed the timing of the class from that day. And he said, "Okay, I will take the next class every day immediately after your first class, and then the rest of the day you guys can go out." And this was our final year. Most of us were preparing for our competitive examination, so all of us had so much else to do. And obviously teachers recognize that. So I'm saying, I'm just giving you an example that the fact that you may be afraid is just a figment of your own imagination. Sometimes all you need to do
It's a mindset, actually.
it's a mindset. Yes. So I think most important, I mean, obviously don't write rageful emails and all that. Very, very important thing. Never reply, never write emails. And therefore, I think on the previous slide, on the email slide, there was this point that flaming and all that should be avoided. Very much avoided in the business context, right? So always be respectful.
Even if others are at fault,
Yeah.
I have no right to write in offensive manner.
Yes, and social media typically accentuates the urge to respond. You should respond. I'm not saying you shouldn't respond, but then you have to take a pause, and you have to think about, again, medium, mindset, message. Very, very important. Is this the right medium to respond? Is this the mindset with which I want to respond? Is the other person in the mindset to receive this response? And if not, then what should be my message, and how should I communicate through what medium so that the other person receives it in the right mindset? Maybe you want to communicate it to them 8 hours later, maybe 2 days later, maybe you want to communicate it to them immediately. Those decisions will make a difference. But I would say don't be afraid. Just go ahead and do it. If But think about all the three M's and then do it, and it will automatically fall in place.
If your
Okay.
time is, you just ask them how much time they would like to be. Already 2 minutes were passed.
Okay.
Just ask
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Just ask them.
So yeah.
Just ask them.
Otherwise, you guys can email me, or you guys can tweet to me, or this is where I am. You can find me on my blog. You can tweet to me on Kulkarni Nikhil, and you can tweet these questions to me. I will answer them, or you can email me. My email address is kulkarni.nikhil@gmail.com.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nikhil. It's really a pleasure, and we'll see you the next week. Yeah.
Sure, sir. Yeah.
Bye. Bye, friends. Take care.